panel has recommended some major changes to SEBI's settlement mechanism. The panel is calling for changes to eligibility criteria, scope of settlement, among other things. Yash Jain is here with the details. Yash, this is something that had been anticipated for quite some time. Industry players were asking for it. What are the changes that have been proposed and what's the process now? How many days of consultation will it take for them to actually come up with a circular?
Well, Kritika, the recommendations which have come from the A.R. Dave committee essentially aim at overhauling the regulations, the current regulations around the settlement procedure under the new SEBI Act. Essentially, this particular committee has identified various stages of the settlement procedure and then recommended amendments at those various stages, starting from the very important point of who is eligible to file for the settlement procedure. Here, remember, companies or the parties which come under the SEBI, SCRA, which is the Securities Contracts Regulation Act, as well as the Depositories Act, are identified under the securities law, which enable them to file for settlement. Now, this particular committee has essentially recommended that the parties which come under the Companies Act should also be brought under the Securities Laws Act, which will enable them also to file for settlement procedure, essentially widening the scope of this particular settlement or the consent application process. Also, the second important point, who is not eligible to file for settlement? Here, the committee has recommended that any party cannot file for settlement for a particular application of the same default if the first settlement application has been rejected by the board of SEBI. Also, currently, any party can only file for a second settlement application with a time interval of about 24 months between the first two applications. Here, this particular committee has really recommended with respect to removal of this cooling period entirely of the 24 months and essentially having no cooling period if the course of action between the two settlement applications is completely different. Similarly, the scope of settlement. Here, market regulator SEBI and the committee has essentially recommended that cases like insider trading, fraudulent and unfair practices should also be settled. Remember, these cases are accepted at this point of time under the settlement route, but they are not settled by market regulator SEBI. Similarly, there have been recommendations with respect to withdrawal of the settlement application as well as the composition of the HPAC, which is the high-powered advisory committee as far as the settlement process is concerned.
Okay.